asking what's in here, you don't want to know what's in here. We are trying out a new recording setup for the screen record. Let's see how we go with this setup. It's not as cool as the iPad. That's okay. That's alright. I reckon this laptop's gonna start feeling really heavy very soon. Okay. So my eyebrows were a bit itchy when I'm always a bit like, you get that weird sensation, and then like I just need to. It's not like I'm trying to. Okay. What do you do when you have two songs that aren't harmonically 100% gelling together? Yeah, we already looked at a section where we do this on purpose. Obviously, we need to do it beforehand most of the time, and we see what songs sort of will work well together, but create that uneasiness. It feels unsettling. That's the word, because they're clashing with each other. And yes, so we can do it on purpose, and we can create, I don't know why I put purpose in quotations, but anyway, we can create something. So we're manipulating the music from a different perspective. We mentioned this sort of multi-dimensionality of your music. So we're not looking at music from its face value. We're trying to create a meaning behind the music. We're using the lyrics. We're using the musical content. We're using some of the rhythms in the music, the melody, to create our own texture, create our own sort of dimensionality in the music, right? So we're able to create these sort of subconscious feelings within the mix. We can do things that might not be perceived as deliberate, but are done in an effort to create a different texture and voice in the mix. Okay, now if I haven't lost you, let's keep going. So that's one key idea. Okay, now what happens if you're just doing it like on the fly and you want to create, a certain scene in the music, or you really want to play a certain song because you know that if you play it after, it's not really going to work. So what do you do in those situations when you really want to play a song, but you just know that it's sort of gonna work, but not gonna work? It's that gray area. The key really here is having confidence in doing that and being adamant about what you want to do. Okay, so let's have a look at a point where we're not deliberately wanting to make them, seem unsettled. We just really want to play this piece, but harmonically, it's not really gelling 100%. Play. Making sure the sync is good.
Our heartbeats used to move in time. They slowed down, left us behind. This is the story. I gotta say.
Okay, so what is causing this clash? Right, so we can hear it, this is a key aspect about ear training, okay? So you can use this as an ear training moment. This is why it's key to have this training, so you can pick up when it's just slightly off. So what's the main component here that's making it off? Okay, outside of the harmonic mixing and all that other stuff, okay, the keys, etc. What is the main component here that's causing the issues? Okay, well, there's a lot of music information. Now, when we say musical information, okay, what are we referring to? Well, it could be a range of different things, okay? But in this context, we're referring to music information within the piece. So you have the bass, the drums, the key melody, the synths, or whatever's playing that melody, the vocal line. You have just snares, you have maybe a hi-hat, you have a piano, you have some guitar maybe. So all this music information is within the music, okay? And now pop music has a lot of musical information, rock music, and it can be difficult to mix, say multiple different songs together. Like it's very challenging to mix, a full-blown production of pop music with another production of pop music when you have a lot of information at the same time. So it's very difficult to mix three at the same time, something like that. You can't just take a vocal of another one, this one take the the drums, or this one take, it's possible, but you really have to pick the right songs, pick the right moments. It's a higher level of complexity. It can be done, but it just requires you to really find the right pieces that will create that glue, that balance between each song, so it doesn't overpower its own self. Okay, so in this situation, we have a lot of music information. Okay, so we have the melody, we have the rhythm, the drums, we have the vocal line, and then not only that, but of the other song, we're going into a song that it isn't just a kick. It isn't just a kick and snare. It's the core melody, the melodic content of the song is straight there. Okay, and for me, the main component here that's clashing is that vocal. Okay, if it was without the vocal, it wouldn't be as noticeable from my perspective. But because we have the lead vocal in there, it's clashing with everything, and it's clashing, and the melodies are clashing, but the counterpoints working, but because they're not harmonically suited to mix well within each other, they're musically, bouncing off. You can imagine like a magnet that they can't go together. They're opposing each other, so they're not wanting to join together. Okay, essentially you have two negatives. Okay, rather than a positive and negative, you have two negatives, and the ions are, I'm not going to get into biochemistry and all that, but they're opposing each other and not going to be able to cohesively strengthen that connection. So the way to combat this is, first and foremost, always look to not be in this situation. Okay, really simple. Secondly, if you do have a song that you really want to play, but you can't, do it later down the line or whatever, what we can look at is creating separation, creating space in your mix. Okay, so right now I'm very, very close, okay, to the camera, to the microphone, and the proximity effect is very close, right? And we would perceive this as I'm really doing my best to say close again. But, from this perspective, it almost feels like someone's right next to you, okay? So our focus point is really this right now, because I'm very, very close to the camera. But as I move back, as we create a distance, that focus point starts shifting, okay? And our main focus, which was the voice, isn't as prominent now, okay? Because we've created that distance, and our proximity effect is much greater than it was, okay? Now, the reason I say this is that what we can do is we have this second piece coming in, okay? We brought up the fader, we brought it in, okay? Now, instead of having the two songs be continuously clashing with each other, we can create that separation by adding effects in, okay? So we're bringing in this second piece with its own melody, etc. And the way we allow the focus point to be on this piece that's coming in is by creating space in that first song, okay? And a common way of doing this is when you hear a lot of reverb in a vocal line, and you're like, oh, it's like it's huge, or like a canyon, right? You're creating this space, this atmosphere around the vocal. Okay, and you can't really pinpoint where it is, but one thing we know is that it's not a close proximity, and we can then spatially, we can then say, okay, if someone's, if I'm standing here, right, and another person's over there, we can say, okay, our attention is usually going to be the person that's quite near to us rather than the person that's quite far away. And this is a very common technique and method to use when you're mixing your own music, your own production. We talk about creating height, creating width, creating depth. These are common ideas when you are, working with, creating a vibe in your music. Okay, when you are mixing your own music in your DAW or analog, whatever you choose to do. And then this is quite a big area. Okay, and I will encourage you to look at there's plenty of courses and tutorials out there that really talk about creating depth, creating height, creating width in your mix. Okay, but one key component here, right, is creating this separation to allow the focus to shift. Especially when you have these two things that are clashing with each other, you can then, instead of having them continuously clash, you can create that separation, allow the second one to come, and that can be the focus, and have everything else be further back. Okay. Now, some other ways to do this is through your EQ. Okay, turning down the low end and allowing the low end to come from the track that's coming in, turning up, manipulating the EQ of one and increasing the effect of the EQ on the track that's coming in, increasing that mid-range. These are just some simple things you can do to create more of that presence in the one that you want, and allowing the focus to shift from the one that you wanted to essentially get rid of. So let's look at it again and see if you can pick up what I'm on about. Okay, see how the vocal is starting to feel almost out of tune? Because it is. Well, not out of tune, but not working with the song that's coming in. See how we're adding the wash, we're adding this reverb, and the focus is that new song that's coming in. Okay, so we're noticing that they're not joining well, they're hitting each other. Cool, no worries. Perhaps move some of the low end, create that space, push, create a big amount of effect, the shimmer, the reverb, the delays, things that push it out into the stereo, give it a bit of that separation, pull it back. Another option here is lowering the volume. If something is louder, we're going to notice that more. We're going to perceive it as closer to us if something's louder to us than something's further away. Okay? And you notice here, if you look at my left hand, you could notice that we are pulling that fader down. So as we're creating this effect, yeah? Okay, so in this instance, we haven't removed the low end, but that could be something that I could have done here as well to create that bigger separation. But here we're moving that fader down, we're adding that effect, okay? Just some of the things I just talked about, and we're creating that space. And not only that, but you're creating now depth in your mix. Okay, so you not only have something here, but you have something around, you have something in the stereo space, then you also have something all the way back. So even though they might be just focused on this, if someone stops and really closes their eyes and listens, you're really creating a beautiful stereo image currently in your mix. Cool, and as rapid kicks come in, the effect is lessening. We've essentially now removed that first song, the new song is coming in, and we're good to go.
I gotta stay high all the time to keep you off my mind. Ooh, high all the time to keep you off my mind.
Okay, now what we're doing is, best practices. Enjoying the music, vibing with the songs, I picked the song for a reason. I really like it. I like that melody. It's a classic melody, a very famous melody. Sing along with it, but that do it in coordination with getting the next track ready. take the time that you have, get it ready so then you can be more relaxed.
Get you, babe, I fall back down. Gotta stay high all my life to forget I'm in.
Okay, take this opportunity, it's getting hot. Take off your jacket, grab a glass of water or something, whatever, unbutton your shirt, whatever you need to do to feel a little more comfortable. Okay, then we talked about creating these more faster transitions. Okay, and we elaborated on why they're considerably more complex than your standard sort of a low end out, bringing in the next song, the more traditional sort of mixing transitions. Okay, the classic sort of mixing. This is a great example here where we are playing the one song, right? But we have to be very, very sharp on the grid. Okay, so the grid's going right at 128 or 126, okay, of the song, okay, and we are punching in. Okay, so as the grid's going, we have, say, a mark here, or if we don't have a cue point, we just look at the grid and say, okay, that's 4 bars there, that's 2 bars, okay. At 2 bars, I want to hit it there, okay, and that's what we're doing. So as the grid's going, okay, that's where I want to hit it, okay. But if you don't hit it, so we're doing this free form, okay, so not synced. We're doing a free form. As the grid's moving on your screen, we press play where we want it, okay? But what happens is that it usually goes here or here. It doesn't go where my knuckle is, say. It doesn't usually go smack on the grid. It'll usually be a little bit forward, a little bit forward, okay? And when you're doing something like this, when you only have 2 bars, it can be very tricky to get the spin back or use a turntable to bring it back where it needs to be, okay? So what can happen is as it's going, right, we know we only have 2 bars, but we can get a bit of a leak from the chorus. So usually in these sections, there might be a second chorus or there's a build that we're switching. So in this scenario, we're building and we don't want to go for the chorus, the drop that's in this current song. We're switching over to a different chorus, okay? But if we don't cut this current one out within 2 bars, we have a bit of a leak because we have the kick, you have the snares, you have all this information coming in. And what you notice, if you listen very, very diligently, that little, that's the first song leaking through because we missed it by, a second, or so. And when we cut it, that low end slightly cut in, okay? And that's why I'm saying, when you are doing something like this is why it's a little more complex because the low end information here is going to be not your friend. And when you are approaching it like this, so like we've talked about before, in these mixes, I do my best to keep them as authentic as possible and not have too much prep involved, just do the basics that I like to do with some of the cue points, have an understanding of the songs and go. That's why I'm using my headphones as well, because might not be as familiar with the songs. And when you have that approach to something like this, you have to be mindful that these certain things will happen because you haven't had the time to really eke out every single transition 100%. When we're talking about creating a full-blown production, okay, we're looking at some of the kings of the game, Madonna. We're looking at Michael Jackson. We're looking at Prince, and they rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed until it was bang on. Okay, that doesn't mean you can't change things up and play this here, play that there, but they know that okay, that song here, I want to do this. And when you approach it from that perspective, then something like this, I would practice. So I know that, okay, when I want with that song, with this song, it needs to be bang on, okay? When you're doing something like this in a live setting, and it's more educational, I am okay with having these sort of mistakes because they're a learning moment. And exhibit A. That's why when you are approaching these transitions, that low end is something you have to be very mindful of. And even if you have to cut it out a little bit earlier, it might sound a little bit strange because it's not 100% smooth. But I would say cut out that first song even a little bit earlier and allow the other one to take over. And that way it's a little bit smoother. You don't have that sort of leakage and that click of that low end coming in. Okay? Okay? Now, when you're thinking about it from a creative perspective, right? Think about it from using your emotional intelligence, okay? There's a lot that we've done already. We've created a big effect, we've just did big transition, okay? That's a good amount for the audience, okay? You want to be careful not to overload the audience with that transition. Move this one, do that. It's not that the audience is dumb or something like that. The audience is actually very, very intelligent, very smart, okay? But the audience needs a bit of a break, just like you need a bit of a break, okay? And find moments and know when you need to just leave things alone, okay? And this is one example where we know just leave it alone, okay? Give yourself, give the audience, give people some space. And just enjoy the music. At the end of the day, people have come to see you. They've come to see, your craft. They want to see you do what you're known for, etc. Play the songs that you're known for, all that. So people know that you're good at what you do. Hammering it down is unnecessary. You being confident, you knowing that you are good at what you do is more than enough. You don't have to show off or go overboard on something. Now this allows us to have a little more creativity now. So we're allowing the song to play through, and now I'm searching through the song that I want to play in. Perhaps there's a different cue point that I want to use. Perhaps the one that I've selected is a little too quick for what I'm liking now. I want to pick a different moment. I want to do another quick transition, okay? And this is the moments where you can really just have your own artistic space to be creative. Okay, so just some best practices. Making sure that the tempo is right. Perhaps we want to decrease the first one, decrease this one. Just making sure that if it's at 126, this one's at 126. Standard stuff. Checking the cue points, making sure that the fade is down or the fade is up for what we want to do. Just standard stuff that fundamental. It's one of my favorite parts. Here we go. Okay, in moments like this, when you sort of have nothing to do, this is where the interaction with the audience comes in. You don't have to blast them with a million lasers and a giant sort of alien staring at you. I'm not saying that they shouldn't do that. It's really cool, right? But you don't want that to be just the center focus of what you do. I think people forget you're there. Okay, so you want to have moments where it's you're still on a human level with people. People we listen to music because of the emotion it gives us and the human interaction. And there's a reason why we go and watch a person live, because we want to have that moment with everyone there to remember that experience. And when the artist or the singer, the performer, the entertainer interacts with the person audience, it's important. It can mean the world to that person, just that single interaction. So those moments are very, very important. Even on the stream, I might not see you personally, but just interacting with you, acknowledging that you're there, that's important to me. And seeing people, people seeing you also vibing with the music, I feel that's very important. Yeah, if people see you enjoying it, that you're not just doing it for the hell of it. You pick the songs because you enjoy them. You're dancing with them. And now we're doing a more of a traditional transition in, okay? A little trickier, okay? So let's break it down. You notice how they have a click coming in with a secondary kick coming in, okay? They sort of work, but they're slightly clashing with each other. Okay, and you can see how we are mixing them in, but they're slightly off the grid, slightly in the grid, slightly off the grid, slightly in the grid. It's fluctuating, okay? It's not smack on. Why would you manipulate the EQ so much? What would be the scenarios when you would want to sort of do something like this? Now, on this model, the EQ capability isn't like super like crazy. You don't have like, individual, bands, and you can do like, minutia frequency changes and all this other stuff you can do on like a Roland, like, 6-channel mixer, right? But again, you got to work with what you have. Okay, currently at my stage with all the equipment that I also use, being a multi-instrumentalist, the piano, the guitars, the drums, my capability to have a $10,000 system at the moment is just not viable. Okay, in the future, sure, we can look at getting more complex mixers and looking at that mixer, the Roland mixer, looking at expanding, looking at individual CDJs, etc. So you got to work with what you have. This setup, this XDJ is fantastic. It allows me 4 channels, gives me great amount of effects, an EQ that I can work with, and a bunch of other stuff. And for me, the way I use EQ, it works for me. I don't like to cut super amounts of crazy low end out. I don't believe in that. We've talked about, linear phase and the issues that can happen phase-wise in music when you cut out too much of that low end. And the same can apply to your mid-range, the high, not just your low end. Aggressively applying EQ can cause all sorts of phase issues. You always want to be very careful with that. Gently adjusting the low end, adjusting the mid-range, the high end. You can do it more aggressively, like we are here when we are increasing that. Actually, I will take that back. This isn't super aggressive. We're adjusting it, about a 45, which, if you're going at 90, over 90, then that's, pushing it. You're pushing really hard. And you can run into like, a lot of phase issues that you don't want to deal with. So in this situation, okay, what we wanted to do here is we wanted to make that vocal space disc very prominent. We want to close that proximity effect, okay? We want to make it the key feature, okay? So we've had this song, we've given it that chorus, its drop, awesome. It had this timeline for 8 bars, and now I want to bring this next song. The reason I haven't cut out that kick is because I want to make it prominent that we are switching. We talked about creating these sort of core moments beforehand, giving something to the audience to know that we are switching over, okay? And one way of doing this is allowing the kick to pierce through like this. And then you might subconsciously notice that the kick, the tone of the kick's changed, okay? And now we're blending in those two songs together. We are manually adjusting that grid, okay? So it's coming in and out, and we're using our ears to align and make sure, because on the grid, it's showing that it's working. And I remember this moment. On the grid, it's showing that it's working, but my ears are telling me it's not 100%. So then we're using the turn to adjust. We're using our turntable, whatever you want to call them, the vinyl turn, the turntable, the CDJ, spin, whatever term you want to use for them. We're adjusting it slightly. We have a very sensitivity on it to be able to adjust fine, create little fine motions, movements, and then we're able to get it to where my ears are happy with how it's moving. Now, so that's the core reason why I am using the EQ a little more intensely here, because we want to increase that vocal, so the pierce through what's happening. Because I know there's a lot of information, want to cut through the chorus. You might not like this, and you might say, oh, you want to cut out that low end. I sometimes don't like to do that. I like it to be noticeable, and it creates a bit of a different tone of the kick. You might not like that. You might want to cut it out and keep moving forward. All I would say here is that for something like this, when you are doing more of a traditional sort of mixing like this, I would keep an element of the low end in. So either you keep the low end of the current song that's playing through and you keep it through, or you bring another one. Okay, and you allow something to keep the groove going. Okay, now again, take it with a grain of salt and try to not have anything in it and see how you can work with it. I find that for these longer sort of transitions, they don't work as well without having like a kick or something there, having that low end impact to glue the mix together. This is a moment when you want to be careful that you don't lose the groove. Okay, at least from my perspective, because it's quite a longer form mixing. Another example of when you would want to sort of have your EQs up, what I like to do also is, particularly when you're blending in two songs it's together, simultaneously playing, moving the low end of one, and having, also the mid-range of one, and increasing the mid-range of another one, and allowing those two to glue together like that. That also helps. If, pop music can sometimes be a bit too bright when you're working with more underground, dance music. Moving some of the high end of that pop song to make it work better with this one. Sometimes old school trance music or old school dance songs have a different mix. The EQ structure is different. So you might want to increase the low end. You might want to increase the mid-range of that song to work better, so it doesn't sound as empty when you play it. Or what I mean by empty is that because it might not be as loud, okay? And increasing the volume in that case also helps. You can see here that we adjusted the channel volume, we increased that mid-range, we even perhaps increased that low end, just to give it a little bit of a fullness, because you're competing with a modern production, a modern mix, and you want it to be able to translate well. So those are just some considerations to think about. When you are dealing with songs that are a little bit older, you might also be cautious of the volume. You are mixing in, making sure that even though if the fader is showing the same volume, right? So this is when we talked about dynamics in your music. Modern songs are heavily compressed. Okay, and older music isn't as compressed, okay, and it might still show the same level, okay, but the dynamics are different, okay, and it's gonna sound slightly quieter than the one that's playing. You always want to be mindful of that and increase the volume if necessary. So yeah, these are just a range of different things to consider when you are working with songs that are a little bit older, when you are working with, wanting to have a certain song prominent, when you're wanting to mix two together and create a stronger sort of blend, stronger sort of connection between the transitions that you're creating or the blends that you want to create. Yeah. And you notice here, we are not playing the song near the end of the chorus. We're playing the song that we are transitioning into right on the chorus. This is something that I like to do when I am wanting to go straight into a particular verse of a song. So instead of it, waiting the song to finish and then having another build, and you're waiting the song to build up again, you play the start of the song at the start of the current song is playing that chorus, and as the chorus finishes, usually if it's a dance formation, it's a dance structure, you can connect them well together. So then you go into the chorus. You notice in this one, we even have a nice outro build that's connecting the two songs together for the space disco. So we have that vocal, we have a nice little outro build, the first one, building, we add a bit of an effect, and then we go straight into the next song. And that way you create a tighter build within your mix, and you keep a strong intention and presence in your mix, and you keep the audience engaged in what you're doing. Sometimes when you have super long transitions and you're waiting for things to finish, and then you bring in the next one and the kick and the snare, it's like, oh my god, okay, I can go to the bathroom and then come back, maybe grab a drink by the time the song starts. So let's look at that scenario one more time, and then we're good. Okay, see, I noticed the fade is slightly coming in, and we're changing that tone on the kick. And I'm noticing that it's still slightly off, even though it's on the grid. It's showing on the grid that it's good. I'm not liking where it is. Now we use our ears. And then again, if we allow that kick to remain there, the audience knows that, okay, something's different. Now, the song that we're playing, it's still going, and it has that sort of outro build that we're going to use now. And when we're adjusting the EQ, the vocal doesn't have to be, the mid-range doesn't have to be so prominent. We're adjusting, moving it back. We've created the effect that we wanted. We're adjusting the volume, making sure that it's blended well. Okay, we're adding that effect on the first song. And then now it's almost like, okay, what is going on? We played, there's the first song playing, the second one playing, we're switching to the third one. Okay, this is an example of where you can have these two songs, and then you can surprise the audience by having a third song and bring that one in. Okay, and the what sound vocal sort of line comes in, and we cut the fader down. Okay, and the song goes into the main part that we want, that main sort of chorus or the main verse section that we want, and we're bringing in the next song. Very quick, straight into the next one, just so we can have it ready and we can move forward. Okay, awesome. Okay, I hope you like the new sort of setup. The lap I think wasn't too bad. It got a bit hot on my lap here, but was actually pretty good. My lap's nice and warm now. I know there's a lot there to unpack, and we're just skimming the surface sometimes of some of these more complex topics. But again, this is why this is why it's the art of mixing. It's not the engine. I don't know what else. I was gonna say the engineering of mixing. We are looking at the border strokes, looking at a painting, looking at adding the blues, adding the yellows, creating the art that's available, and looking at topics, looking at the techniques, looking at the skills that go into creating that beautiful artwork. Okay, and everything that I talk about, please write it down, or look it up on Google and explore. So much to cover. This can turn into like a 5-hour breakdown, but the key things to look at here are, if you have a song that you really want to play, but it doesn't work harmonically, a key way to be able to incorporate that is, creating space, creating that distance from those two songs. You can say, oh, you just wait for it to finish. If you're at midway of a song, it's boring just standing there waiting for the song to finish. Find ways to creatively confident in transitioning, in moving to another song. Yeah, and cutting out the low end, adding a lot of effects on that vocal, adding a lot of effects in general on the song to separate, to push it out. Keeping the low end of the current song that you're moving in, decreasing the fader of the song you want to remove, lowering the volume, filtering it out. These are just some examples of things you can do to remove that song as quick as possible so it doesn't interfere with the one you want to play. In most cases, I would say, put it in a moment that works better. But if you have this, in this kind of example where it's not going to really work later, then this is something that you can do. Secondly, when you are looking at, doing is more like your faster transitions, okay? Be mindful of that low end. If you have, 2 bars, or like a bar to do that quick switch, always be mindful to remove some of that low end. If you don't get a chance, just always try to remove that song even slightly earlier, even if it might just be slightly off-putting. Perhaps try and add a quick little effect or something like that. The best thing to do in those situations is just do that in like a full-blown show that you have. Do be mindful of doing them. Doing them when you have a lot of practice behind that mix, that show that you want to do. This is when these moments are really cool, because you have them really down, you have them prepared, you have them practiced. When you are doing this, when you have them very sort of just let's go for it, and you're creating these sort of very spontaneous sort of transitions and blends, etc., you just need to be mindful of that. And sometimes we'll have a bit of that low end leak. It's not super noticeable, it's not going to be like, oh my god, but it's just something you want to be mindful of and do your best to practice that and have that confidence to transition, even if there might be a little bit of low end leakage. And then the final thing is looking at using your EQ, creating depth with the dimensionality in your mix with the EQ. EQ is very, very powerful. Just because you might only have 3 bands available in the current sort of setup that you have, it's still very powerful. Still a lot of things you can do with that. Adding mid-range, increasing the volume, taking out some of the low ends, removing high end. These are some things that you can gently do, but just be mindful again of phase issues if you really crank it up. Removing all that low end, I see it all the time, you're shoving that low end down. Just be mindful of that, because it's not good. I personally don't like doing that. I don't think it's good practice when you're shoving all that low end out. In that case, if you really anal about all that low end, just use a filter. Go cut out what you want a bit much more musically instead, rather than just you have your sort of EQ and just going and you sort of suppressing that down, and then you sort of pushing it all out into the mid-range and high end, and they can create a lot of phase issues. Okay, these aren't linear phase EQs. Okay, but when you're using a filter, you can gently carve out that section. It's much more musical and a little more audio friendly. So in this case, when you are removing the low end, remove a little bit. You don't need a lot to get the point across. These are very powerful cues, and 20 dB is a big difference. 10 dB is a big difference. So that's just something to be mindful of, but great to create stronger blends, stronger connections with the songs, with transitions, increasing that, especially if you want to do more classical mixing techniques, longer form transitions and more like sort of vinyl mixing approaches. Can approach it from something like that. I really like to do that kind of stuff. manipulating the EQ, bringing up that, the vocal, make it more prominent in the song. Particularly if you're working with, the full song, you're not working with just the vocal line, being able to increase a certain mid-range of a song and decreasing another one. This is when you're able then to use, the full song, the full production, and then being able to musically use the counterpoint, use different other mixing techniques to make the songs work well together. So you have the melody of one and the another one, you give that call and answer approach. And you're able to then really connect them well together and bring another third song to create a bit of a space around them, and you can do some really wild and creative things. So from a beginner standpoint, just look at, moving up a little bit of that low end and increasing that mid-range. See how you can, have two songs playing together and see, just tweaking that mid-range. What can you do with that? Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for joining me on a new episode. This was a big episode. It's probably the biggest one so far. But yeah, some really cool and really important stuff here to help you on your mixing journey. And I have to say, I'm learning so much as well from this. Just, really being introspective about the way I approach things is really helping me be a lot more clear and coherent with, the approaches that I take and the way that I think about things when I'm mixing. So thank you. Thanks so much for allowing me to educate myself as well. So cool. I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you so much for joining me again on another breakdown. And I'll catch you on the next one. All right. Bye-bye.